Hello everyone and welcome to an indie game first look for Slay the Spire from Mega Crit. This is accessible on Steam, and as this thing says, it's in early access. So what is it exactly? Slay the Spire is a roguelike deck building game that's made to work like a dungeon crawl. If any of you have had experience with the Hearthstone dungeon runs, it's a little bit kind of sort of like that. But there's more to it than that. It's a way more complex game than Hearthstone is. Yeah. Anyway, this first look's going to be a little bit different than my normal ones. My normal ones, I go into it kind of blind and it's a first impressions video. This one's going to be more of a explanation video and a kind of a more in-depth look at the game. If you have any thoughts or feelings on one format or the other, feel free to leave a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the game. As I said, the game is a dungeon crawling game. And this is new. As I said, it's in early access, and they are adding things all the time. They're upgrading graphics, adding new monsters, adding new cards, all kinds of stuff. They're going to be adding a new class soon. But anyway, right now your options are the Ironclad, and the only real difference between the two classes, or the two characters rather, is their card selection and their starting relic. The starting relic for the Ironclad is that he heals 6 hit points at the end of every combat. And the Silent is a rogue woman, and her starting relic says that at the beginning of every combat she draws 2 additional cards. There's also an ascension level down here at the bottom. After you've beaten the game and unlocked everything, I think you have to unlock everything. You can choose to do ascension levels, and basically what it does is every time you beat it, you get to the new ascension level, and that unlocks all of the monsters being more difficult and more difficult fights popping up more often. We're going to not do ascension at the moment, just to kind of get started, and we're going to do the Ironclad. This is the one that you'll start with. You have to unlock the Silent. So we'll start with the Ironclad. Here's another guy that you will not see the first time you play the game. This is Niao. He's a giant demon whale. And he is your benefactor for one reason or another. I won't get into that at the moment. There is lore for who he is and why he does what he does. But he after you get to the first boss in the game, once you die and come back to the start again, he'll start giving you benefits. All of these are fairly interesting. I think I'll just start with obtaining gold. Although removing a card from your deck is actually pretty strong. I'll just go starting gold. So now we'll get into the actual dungeon. So every dungeon mapping is randomized. You can see you pick a path that you want to follow, and you have branches that come out of previous options, and every time you go through this, these are randomized. The game currently consists of 3 of these. You go through a big long series of fights and random events until you get to the boss, and every floor you heal to full, and every boss fight you get certain items. So there are a number of things you can have happen. I'll try to find a path where we will hit all of them. Okay, I've got it figured out. Yeah, we'll go this way. So these symbols here are normal or everyday ordinary fights. And this is how a fight happens. You start with every turn you draw 5 cards from your deck, and you have 3 energy by default. There are ways to increase these. You start with 3 energy. So this is us. This is our enemy, how many hit points they have. And when you mouse over your enemy, or yourself even, you can see what they're doing. So this boss is intended to use a buff on himself this turn. So we know that he's not going to hit us. Our deck currently consists mainly of strikes and defends. Strikes are attack cards. They do 6 damage, and you see they take 1 energy to cast. Defends are a skill card. They give us 5 block, and they cost 1 energy as well. Our whole deck is those except for this one card called Bash. Bash takes 2 energy to cast, does more damage than the normal strike, and it applies vulnerable to the enemy, which means the enemy will start taking more damage. 2 vulnerable means that they will be vulnerable, I hate saying that word, for 2 turns in a row. So let's get to it. Since he was not attacking this turn, we're fine with just going ahead and doing full out damage. Not really worried about defending ourselves because he's not going to hit us. With that, we end our turn. So now he has an incantation. He casts a ritual on himself. It says at the end of the turn, he gains 3 strength. And this turn, he's going to hit us for 6 strength. That's what this little repair means. So it would be nice to block some of that. Because, as you can see up here and below us are our hit points. We have 80. How much our gold we have. And potion slots. Potions are single-use items that have some effect for the duration of combat. And they do various things. They do damage. They let us draw more cards. All kinds of things of that nature. Now, I'm going to go ahead and defend and show you what block does. So block is basically temporary hit points. What block does is it will prevent 5 damage for a turn. When it comes back to our next turn, any block that is still around will disappear. There are items and cards that get around that, but for the most part, that's what will happen. And I guess it's worthwhile talking about playstyle differences between the 2 classes or 2 characters. So you see all this, I could have prevented all the damage for the turn, like I'm doing this turn. However, the Ironclad plays a little bit, you have to play a little bit offensively because the Ironclad's whole thing is he's going to be gaining 6 hit points back at the end of every single turn. Because of that, it's okay to take a little bit of damage every turn. And we're 1 off lethal. However, when you're playing the Silent doesn't have this incredibly useful relic to gain hit points back at the end of every turn. And because of that, it's not taking damage is a way bigger deal to the Silent than it is to the Ironclad. And just to show you, the reason why his damage is going up every single turn is because he's gaining 3 strength every single turn. Strength makes the damage that your attacks do go up by an equal amount. So his attacks are doing 9 more damage than they should be doing. There is also a block equivalent to this called Dexterity, and it does the same thing for blocking. Okay, so combat's over. We gained our hit points from our Burning Blood relic, and we get some spoils. Every fight will get you gold. Some fights will get you potions. For this instance, this one's an energy potion. That will give us 2 energy for a turn. And we get a card. Now, there are different rarities for cards. I believe blues are uncommons, grays are commons, and then there's yellows that are rares. And this is what the whole game is based around. You have to look at these cards and say, which of these do I think is better? And for this, Cleave is okay. It's not great. Combust is okay in a certain deck. There are decks that you can build that are all based around losing 8 hit points every turn intentionally. And this card will go very well in that. But if you're not in that deck, this card isn't that great to me. Dropkick, however, is always good because, as you can see here, basically what happens if the enemy you're hitting with this has vulnerable on them, you get the energy back that you spent to cast a spell and you draw a new card. And we already have a card in our deck that puts vulnerable on a creature. And because of that, this deck is alright. So, our next encounter is going to be an unknown encounter. Anything can happen. It could be a fight. It could be a merchant that we'll talk about later. It can be a treasure chest. It can be a random event, which looks like we're going to get this time. So, random events can be good or bad. They're usually good and bad. For instance, this one, we can get the Golden Idol, and this is much like Indiana Jones, and each of these unknown events have a story that goes along with them. So we take the Golden Idol. It looked really innocuous and completely safe, but now we have a giant boulder coming towards us, as I said, just like Indiana Jones. So we have options here. We can become cursed and gain an injury. Curses are cards that come into your deck. You can't do anything with them. As you see, they are unplayable. So essentially, they just clog your deck up with useless cards that you can't use. We can take 20 damage, or we can lose 6 max hit points. But looking at the run we have coming up, we're going to hit a campfire soon, which is a rest point where you can regain hit points. So I'm not so mad about taking 20 hit points. Max hit points, however, is a whole other bag. Those are a bit more big of a deal. Here we have the helpful cleric. He gives me an opportunity to talk about some interesting things. So he'll let us give him gold to heal, or he'll give us gold to remove a card from our deck. This is a very useful thing. So throughout this game, you'll be drafting cards. Sometimes the cards are not going to be good enough for the deck that you're building, so you need to skip them. Don't draft a card just to have another card in your deck, because what your goal is really, in most cases, is to make your deck as small as possible with the most powerful cards imaginable. And not to make these guys out to be crap, but defends and strikes are not good cards. They are the weakest cards you can possibly have. And then because of that, if you have the opportunity to get rid of them, I would advise that you get rid of them. And your deck will need strikes or defends more than one or the other. It's usually you can get rid of them pretty evenly. But anyway, so merchants are awesome because you can buy. They have a card for sale every time. They have all of these cards that you can choose from that let you kind of build your deck in a certain direction. They have potions. They have relics, and which I haven't really talked about. I kind of sort of discussed them. Relics are these passive items that you gain that give you passive abilities. For instance, this one will make it where at the start of every turn you deal 3 damage to somebody. This one makes it where every time you add a skill card to your deck, it's an upgraded version of it. And I hadn't even talked about upgrades yet. And the toolbox says at the start of each combat, add a random colorless card to your hand. Colorless cards are almost always free, and they are all almost always good. And of course, he has the card removal service. So we have to plan out what we want. Which of these cards are just really, really awesome. And in my experience, Exuma is good in a very specific kind of deck. I'll go ahead and get Metallicize, and we'll take another strike out of the deck. Now there are definitely decks where you do not want to take strikes out. However, this one's fine for doing that. Oh my! So this unknown event's very interesting. We find a giant ooze full of sharp metal objects, and we can pay hit points to try and find a relic. We got lucky. We got the 25% chance to get a relic out, and we got the Shuriken. If you play 3 attacks in a turn, you gain the strength, which is actually very nice in certain decks. All right, so now we're at the rest point. You can rest, which means you heal 30% of your hit points. Or you can smith, which means upgrade a card in your deck. And there are relics that allow you to do other things at rest points, but we don't have those. I'm just going to show you what smithing is. So these are the base level cards. They all do their base level things. However, if you click on them to upgrade them, they do more things. Like for this instance, upgraded dropkick does more damage. Upgraded metallicized gives you more block every turn. Upgraded bash deals more damage and makes the enemy vulnerable for longer. However, I'm about to go into a strong fight, so I'm going to go ahead and rest just because I don't want to die in the middle of recording this. I would probably not do that normally. I would probably upgrade a card normally. But we're about to go into the elite fight. Any fight marked with this is an elite fight. Elites are way stronger, and this is the Gremlin Knob. He is incredibly strong. So, elite fights are way stronger, as I think I said already. You have to be much more careful about how you handle these guys. For instance, he gains something called Enrage. Enrage says whenever you play a skill, he gains 2 strength. That means every time you play any card that can mitigate his damage, he does more damage. So he is a very frustrating guy. Fortunately for us, we had him vulnerable, so our drop kick allowed us to draw a card and gain something. And we have Metallicize already ticking, which will give us 3 block at the end of every single turn. Isn't that wonderful? It is. And we played 3 attacks in a turn, so we got 1 strength. Now all of our attacks will be doing 1 more damage for the rest of combat. So, as you see, when I play the skill, he gained 2 strength, and now he's doing 8 damage instead of normal 6. However, I have 5 block. I'll gain 3 block at the end of my turn, so all of his damage is done away with. However, he's now made us vulnerable, so as you can see, he does considerably more damage. To be quite honest, this guy is basically just a race. The big thing about him is kill him. Make him die as quickly as possible, because you will not be able to outblock his damage unless you have a very, very good block deck, which I do not have. All right, so I can't play all my strikes, so I believe this will kill him. Yeah, with my extra strength and him being vulnerable, I've done enough damage to kill him. Now, elites give us more gold than normal fights. They also give us relics. They're not the best relics in the game, but they are all good. For instance, this one is you just get 30 gold and you can find treasure more often in the question mark rooms. Treasures always give us a relic, so finding those more often would be nice. Oh my goodness. Let's see. So each of these cards have their place. Headbutt, if you have a particularly powerful card in your deck, Headbutt can help you get that back after you play it, so it's useful. Clash allows you to play, if you have a heavy attack deck, Clash is really good because it's 0 mana for 14 damage, 0 energy, apologies, for 14 damage, but you have to have only attacks in your hand to do this. I'll go ahead and get that because our deck's fairly small at the moment, and getting the hand that's only attacks is fairly easy. So let's take a look here at what we got. Armaments is actually a fairly good card for Ironclad. It lets you upgrade, gives you some block and upgrades a card in your hand. Upgrading cards is always good. No, that's good for a nice combo deck, but we don't have that at the moment. And we don't have a lot of gold either. I think I just want to take Flex. Flex gives us temporary strength, which is fine. And now we get to a treasure chest. This is our last type of encounter that we can have. Treasure chests have relics inside them. Fairly good relics. This one is every 3 times you shuffle your deck, you gain 2 energy. That carries over between combats, if I remember correctly. Let's see if we can't even buy anything, so let's go on. That carries over between combats, so it's not just, you have to shuffle 3 times in a turn. You can shuffle 3 times over the course of things, and you'll have it. Okay, so louses, they have a thing called curl up. The first time they take damage in a turn, they will curl and gain block. This will happen only once, which I will show you. As you can see, he gained 4 block, but now he can't do it again. And this card just straight out kills that dude. So see, Clash is a fairly good card. Now, it's his turn, so his block drops off, and he doesn't get that ability back, so he's just dead. Poor little louse. We got our Swift Potion to draw 3 cards. Ooh, all these are actually fairly nice. So Rampage is good in the small deck that can draw a lot of cards because it increases in damage every time we play it. This one's good in the combo deck, but this one's just good in general. Gaining strength, just in general, is good because you want to be attacking all the time, obviously. So let's upgrade a card. I believe we'll upgrade Inflame. It makes it we gain 3 strength instead of 2. Now that may seem like not much. It's only 1 more. But any strength boost that you can gain is usually always fairly nice. And yeah, we'll just take that damage. I'm not scared. And that's the thing about this game is it's all about managing. Okay, what can I play this turn? What can I not get away with playing this turn? What cards do I want? Do I actually want these cards in my hand? Or in my deck, rather? I think I might... No, I didn't take... if I had taken Rampage, the card that got stronger every time we played it, I would have taken Headbutt, because then I would be able to get it back out of my discard pile over and over again. However, let's say Ghostly Armor. Ghostly Armor is actually pretty good. Now, this is an example of a card that you have to unlock. I haven't mentioned that, but I have unlocked everything in the game. However, you don't start with all of the cards for either of the characters unlocked, and you don't start with all of the relics unlocked either. You have to get yourself up to that. These guys have an interesting mechanic. They have Thievery. Every time they hit you, they take 15 gold from you. They're your standard RPG thief type monster. They'll attack you a couple times and steal some of your money, and then they'll run away. So they suck. They're big jerks. And what they'll typically do is they'll hit you a number of times. Not sure what the exact number would be. They'll hit you a number of times, and then they will take off. But they didn't get that opportunity, thankfully. As I said, they're big jerks, and if you kill them before they run away, you get your money back. Isn't that wonderful? Oh my. Spot weakness. This will give us 3 strength if the enemy is going to hit us, which is awesome. And actually, the enemy art that's in this card is the boss that we're going to be fighting here in a second. So it kind of all goes together. Isn't that something? And that's before I'm going to rest, even though I probably in a normal run would have upgraded the card there and said, screw it. I'll take the risk on fighting the boss. However, I don't want to die in the middle of this run. Have to record everything over again. So here's our boss. As I said, he's the guy who is in the artwork of the card we just got. He's interesting. He's going to give himself some block and give a buff to himself. Also, after taking 30 damage, he switches combat modes. So we want to play Ghostly Armor. I haven't mentioned this before. There's lots to talk about in this game. If a card says Ethereal in it, that means if the card is in your hand at the end of the turn, it's exhausted, and exhausted cards never show up for the rest of combat. So we definitely don't want that to happen. We want to be able to play that card again later, because this guy, while he's in this form, is his attack mode, and as you can see, he does a fair amount of damage. So let's try and stop that. We're not going to stop that. So long-term goals. I'm going to go ahead and drink an energy potion just to show you guys what happens. I drank it, and I get 2 more energy back. So I'm going to block what I can of this. Because I couldn't do enough damage to make a mode shift, unfortunately. So, dang it, we drew spot weakness in the wrong time. He's not going to attack us, so it won't work. Unfortunate. So, what happens when we make a mode shift? He curls up into a ball and gains 20 armor. And he's going to cast a buff on himself. The buff he casts on himself is called Thorns. Or Sharp Pride in his case. There are other cards that give you things called Thorns, so they're the same thing. This is whenever he takes damage from an attack, he deals 3 damage back to the person hitting him. So we're going to smack him for 9, and he's going to deal 3 back to us. Isn't he just a little bastard? Yes. So he hangs out in this mode for a little while, and then eventually he'll hit you with a ton of damage and turn back into his normal form. I forgot to mention, but the sundial went off there. We shuffled our deck 3 times, so we got 3 extra energy there, which is fun. I don't think I talked about it a lot, but this deck is not particularly good for the Shuriken relic that we have. It's harder for us to play 3 strikes in a turn. But I'm trying, guys. I swear. And we're 2 off of making the mode shift. I was hoping I did my math incorrectly on whether I could get him the mode shift or not. Fortunately for us, we did block a fair amount of that damage. And once again, we draw spot weakness when he's not going to attack us. And we can't play our clash because we can't possibly get rid of all the cards in our hand. So I'm going to draw 3 cards and just try and get something out of this. Okay, I'm going to bash him and make a mode shift. There we go. That was crap. We could have potentially waited another turn and let him do the buff on himself. However, I don't think that would have been a great idea. So let's go ahead and block. Yeah, I contemplated just taking 3 more damage off of his sharp hide and then a little bit more damage off his attack, but I don't want to do that. Finally, we get the spot weakness off of that. Getting a little bit of temporary strength. Smack him for 15, and then smack him for 23 off of there. So one thing you do want to watch out for is make sure that your hit points are more than the damage he's going to take here. Here it says 8 times 2. So as the little tooltip there says, that means he's going to hit us for 8 damage twice. So 16 damage in all. We're going to block 3 and take 13. But that's okay. One thing to keep in mind when you're fighting these boss fights is we shuffled our deck 3 times, so now we have 5 energy because Sundog gave us 2. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind when you're fighting bosses is after a boss fight, you heal to full. And because of that, don't feel so bad about getting the low life totals, because you're just going to heal it back all up after this fight anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. I do believe in Ascension modes, this isn't 100% true. I think Ascension modes make it where you only heal a portion of your health, not all of it. So be a little bit careful about that. But as the card says there, we're about to do 18 damage to him, and he's going to die. So boss fights give us way more gold, and they give us a guaranteed rare card. As you can see, all the rare cards are nice and yellow, and they're also all fairly good. Juggernaut can help you build a block deck where every time you get blocked, you deal damage to enemies. This one's good for the deck that I mentioned earlier, where your whole deck's based around losing life and gaining life back. This card helps a lot with that. Limit Break helps if you have a deck where you're going to be building up strength. That seems to be what my deck's doing thus far. I've got Flex, Inflame, Spot Weakness. All of them get a strength. So Limit Break would be good for that deck. It will double the strength that you have when you cast it. And with that floor is done. And you get a boss relic. Boss relics are either a marginally nice card like this, the Tiny House. It's okay. Runic Pyramid, you don't discard your hand at the end of the turn. However, you draw 1 less card every turn. It's actually very useful. And most of the boss relics involve you starting with more energy every single turn. However, it has some drawback. This one, you can no longer obtain potions. I don't care that much, so that's what I'll pick. Because having extra energy is incredibly strong. And with that, we're on floor 2. As I said earlier, at this point in the early access, there are only 3 floors. After that, you've beaten the game and you can go and do it all over again. And with that, that's a first look. I think we've played quite a bit of it. You should have gotten a fairly nice idea of how the game is played. And that's all I have to say about that. As I said, I've been playing this game a lot. I've unlocked everything in the game so far. I enjoy these kinds of deck building games very, very much. So this game really kind of speaks to me. And as I said, they've been doing updates constantly, either graphically or adding new content to the game. So far, this hasn't been an early access game that came out and they just left it there in beta forever. They are improving it. As I'm showing here, I'm recording this on the 23rd, and the last update they did was on the 22nd. So they are updating things a lot. And at the start there, I was completely shocked to see that mode options menu. Anyway, the game, as I said, the game is on Steam. It's $20, and for the amount of hours I've put into this game, it's well worth it. $20. If the game looks interesting to you, I encourage you to pick it up. And not too long after this video goes out, I'm going to have another video that coming out that will show one of the crazier things you can do in this game. There are some pretty crazy decks you can build if you get the right combinations of cards and relics. But I'll be showing that soon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh god. Oh, I love this deck so much.